I'm Shayda. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm finally getting around to doing that hand lettering supplies tutorial that I know you've been asking for. So let's just get started. So before we begin, I want to talk a little bit about what this video will be and what it won't be. So what I'm not going to do today is get super in-depth describing each and every supply and how it works and what it does. I feel that that information is already out there on my channel. If you go and watch some of the other tutorials, you can find out, how to use watercolors or what do you use brush markers for, things like that. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, catch up on some of those tutorials, and if you still have questions, please do leave me a comment and I'll try my best to answer it, and potentially even in video format. But what this video will be is just sort of a fun behind the scenes look at my desk, at all my favorite art supplies. I'm going to talk a little about how I store my supplies because there's a lot of them. And then I'm going to give you a rundown of my top items for getting started in lettering and illustration. So if you don't have anything and you want to get into art and drawing and lettering, I'm going to tell you what I would suggest going out and buying to get that sort of starter kit set up. And most of it you can actually find at the dollar store. All right, so let's take a look at my desk. This is what my desk would look like first thing in the morning when I start working. So the first thing you might notice is that it is a piece of plywood, and I do have a desk with drawers, and then I've just put a piece of finished plywood on top, and that's so that if I get paint or ink on it, it doesn't matter. And I also like the way it looks in styling shots. I like the color of the wood. And then I've got my tea. Tea is very important to have for the artistic process. Just kidding. And then I have some felted animals that I'm working on. This cute little bunny hopefully will feature in a tutorial this summer. I also have my covered notebooks that I've covered with fabric, and if you want more info on how I did that, I will link that tutorial in the description below. I have my to-do list here, very, very important. Couldn't live without that. And then I have this gray grid, which you might notice, and this is a Martha Stewart cutting mat. Now, there's a few reasons that I like having this here and that I always keep it on my desk. The first is that it makes a really nice sort of makeshift writing pad. So it's a nice smooth surface for doing your lettering on or drawing, but also it offers a great cutting surface. Obviously, that's what it is. So if I want to cut down a piece of paper, all I have to do is line it up on the grid, and then I just place a ruler on top, and I just make a nice cut with an X-Acto knife. And it's a great way to make nice straight cuts because I have that grid available to me. So that's really cool. I think these are still available. If you just Google Martha Stewart cutting mat, you can probably find the same one. And then in my glass jars here, I have all my most used tools. So I have black and white gel pens, a bunch of pencils, and then in this jar I have all my Pigma microns, all my Sakura pens really. So I've got some brush markers and nib pens there, just the things that are really my go-to lettering tools. So that's what my desk looks like. This is what you wouldn't see on camera. This is over on the side of my desk. I got this really cool box at IKEA. I think it was under $20 in Canada anyway. And it's made up of these two boxes that fit together. I think they're bamboo. And in the top, you can see here, in the top, I keep all my papers. So any projects that I still need to photograph for Instagram, or that I still need to photograph for a video, or any scrap paper, blotting sheets for watercolors or extra tracing paper, that just all sort of goes in the top. So anything that's still sort of in use, I'll keep in there. So it's a great filing system. And then in the front, you can see I've just got a couple mason jars. This one I actually painted the inside of the jar, so that's fun, kind of a fun way to decorate your mason jars. And I have all my paint brushes in there. I've got a lot of them. I tend to like synthetic brushes, both for watercolor and acrylics and gouache, but I'll get into that a little more later. In the second jar here, I have all my fine tip markers, so anything like a Sharpie fine point or a Staedtler Triplus fine liner. And then in the third jar, I've got all my art markers. Now, I don't have a lot of art markers. They're expensive, and frankly, I think I see some highlighters in there. So I just have a couple. I've bought them one at a time or two at a time from various stores, and I'm just sort of building up my collection slowly, and I'll get into all the different brands a little later in the video. Okay, so that's pretty much what my desk would look like and all the stuff that I have at hand. And now we'll talk a little bit more about specifics. First of all, I've got all my Sakura pens here, and the Pigma Microns are excellent if you're getting into hand lettering because they come in a range of nib sizes, and that means that you're going to get this sort of ultra precision. You can choose, do you want to use the very smallest nib or the largest, and you can give some real attention to detail with that. Then I also have a few mechanical pencils at hand here, and I use those again and again for my hand lettering because they don't smudge and they're very precise. And I have a gum eraser. This is a soft eraser that erases very well without sort of pulling or creasing your paper. And then as far as my fine point markers, I love Staedtler Triplus fine liners. I also love the Sharpie fine points, and I just usually pick them up one or two at a time, same as the markers, and I build up a little collection. You'll also see me use Sharpie pens quite often in videos. I love them because they are very precise and they are waterproof. All right, let's talk a little about some of these markers. So I get a lot of questions about the brand of the markers that I'm using, and because I've bought them one at a time, I have some different brands. First of all, these ones I get asked about most often. The ones on the left here are from DeSerres, and then the rest of the markers are from Prismacolor. Now, DeSerres is a Canadian art store, and the markers are fine, but I wouldn't overly recommend them. I would recommend you get Prismacolor. They last longer, they're a better quality, and they're more readily available. But I do like these markers from the art store DeSerres, so if you can order them online, go for it. Now, the art markers come in two types. First of all, there's the brush marker, and it has a fine point tip. These are dual tip markers. And then the brush marker sort of looks like the head of a paintbrush. And you can see that there. It depends how much pressure you apply. You can get a really fine line or you can get a much thicker line. Then this is the art marker. It has the dual tip, and then it has a chisel tip on the other end. And the chisel tip I find is great for all kinds of things like laying down washes of color. So there's the brush marker and the art marker. And those are sort of the two types that make up the category of artist markers or art markers. Now I also have these Faber and Castell brush markers. I picked them up in I think a set of 6, sort of in some nice neutral colors. And that's my little mini marker collection. All right, so moving on. In terms of paints, I use a lot of watercolors on the channel, and I don't have anything of any real quality. I just have a bunch of entry-level, basically, craft quality watercolor discs, and if you would like to try watercolor, I suggest just going to the dollar store or going to an art store and just getting a cheap set and just see if you like it, and you can always upgrade later. So we're not using anything too fancy. These are my gouache paints. These are Reeves, and Reeves is an entry-level art brand, and they're great. And gouache is a high opacity watercolor paint, so it's very, very opaque. I do have a tutorial all about gouache, and I'll link that in the description below, but it's another great tool for doing illustration and lettering. You can do some really beautiful, very colorful paintings with the gouache. Then I also use watercolor pencil crayons, and this is a set from Staedtler that I think I've had for 10 years, so they go a long way, and they're another great way to get that watercolor look. And if you need info about that, I will link that tutorial in the description below. All right, so let's talk a little bit about paint brushes. So as I said, I really like the synthetic brushes, and synthetic brushes are normally a white or an orange bristle. And I find they're meant for acrylics, I think, but you can use them for watercolor, and I really like them for watercolor. Brushes that are not synthetic would be like a horsehair brush, and these I don't really use for anything except for staging. I like the way they look in the photos, so that's why I have them, and you'll notice them in all kinds of photographs in these videos. And you should experiment with some different brushes and see what you like, because most of these are available at the dollar store. This one I just got recently. This is sort of a larger synthetic brush, and I've been experimenting with using it with my watercolors. If you are getting into watercolor and you're trying to sort of up your game and learn more, I recommend getting a larger brush like this, because it kind of forces you to not overwork the paints and sort of get used to letting the watercolors do what they want. All right, and then I also have a desk full of all kinds of supplies. I love washi tape, and I've got a bazillion gel pens and markers. And I suggest when you're looking for art supplies that you don't limit yourself. If you want to try something, try it. Okay, let's talk a little about paper. So I always use graph paper in my tutorials to begin a design. Then we also use tracing paper to help us perfect our designs or our lettering projects. If we're doing watercolors, you'll see me using cold pressed 140 or 200 pound watercolor paper. It's just a nice heavy dense paper with a lot of texture, and anything over 140 pounds you probably won't have to stretch. And if you need more info about watercolor paper and stretching, I will link that tutorial as well. We also use graphite transfer paper quite often in these tutorials in order to transfer our finalized lettering and illustration designs onto our good copy pages. And finally, I use a lot of cardstock in these tutorials because of its thickness and smoothness. It's perfect for using with your artist pens and markers. The pens won't really bleed through, and it has a really nice look, and you can also make your own greeting cards using that. So for the final bit of this video, I just want to show you what you would need to get started in lettering. You want to follow along with a bunch of the tutorials on this channel. Here's what we're using most often. First of all, mechanical pencil, good eraser. Next, some artist pens. Grab a Sharpie pen, they're available at the drugstore, or Pigma Microns because they're so precise. You'll want some craft scissors and a ruler, as well as some washi tape to help keep your designs in place and it won't sort of rip your paper when you go to remove it. To create our designs, we normally use graph paper, and you can pick up a pad of that at the dollar store. And then to transfer and perfect our designs, we use transfer paper and tracing paper, which you can grab at a stationery store or an art store. And then finally, it's just that cardstock, and you can get a pack of 100 sheets of cardstock for like $10 at the most. So that's sort of my lettering and illustration starter kit. You can find all of those things quite easily. And then if you want to go one step further, you don't have anything, but you want to start purchasing some of these supplies, I would grab a pad of watercolor paper and a set of craft quality watercolor discs, as well as a small pack of brushes. Now I'm going to link all the tutorials that I've mentioned in the description below, so if you need more info about covering your own notebooks or Pigma Microns or gouache or stretching watercolor paper, look for that in this video's description. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button. And before I go, I just wanted to say congratulations to the winner of my latest contest. You will be getting this amazing prize pack that is full of all the supplies you need to get started with hand lettering and illustration, and that's thanks to Sakura. So congratulations, and I will see you guys next week.